of all, welcome Mr. Gautam, and thanks for taking the time to speak to us today. This is one of the very first episodes of Decode we have shot, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board. Decode is a food tech podcast featuring pioneers who are shaping the F&B industry in India and beyond. We have a treat for the audience today. Mr. Gautam, CEO Kouzina Food-Tech, a proven investor, seasoned deal maker, an entrepreneur, and someone who's very much a part of the startup scene and who thrives in it. Mr. Gautam started Kouzina in 2013, along with three of his friends, and it has now blossomed into a thriving digital-first food tech company in over 40 locations, 9 cities, and has multiple brands including WarmOven, KaatiZone, Indiana Burgers, and many, many more. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Hey, thanks, Kaushal. Thanks for having me. Look forward.
I think, there's no other way to kind of get started right now than to kind of find out if you're doing fine, if your family's okay, your loved ones. Is everything good on your end?
Yeah, so far fortunate enough to be protected and staying safe.
Now, when you visit the Kouzina website, right, Kouzina calls itself a technology-driven chain of virtual restaurants. Now, until a couple of years ago, or maybe even today for a lot of people, this could be a very confusing statement for the uninitiated. Could you tell us what that means? What is a technology-driven chain of virtual restaurants? What does that mean?
The famous Silicon Valley venture capitalist Mark Andreessen once said, software is eating the world, right? So to connect and engage with customers, we will need to be on tech platforms, right? It could be called an Instagram or a Facebook or any other channel of that nature. So the brand needs to be created using technology. Where do we get the sales and or the orders in each of these kitchens? Orders come through tech platforms, which can be called a Swiggy, Zomato, or an Amazon. Tomorrow it could be somebody else. Once the order comes into the kitchen, how do we make sure that the kitchen is actually executing the order? Again, you need technology, which is POS systems and some integration with these aggregators, which is where obviously we've been one of your customers for the longest time. That comes in. Then you'll need technology for managing people, right? And over time, you will need some level of predictions for inventory management, preparing for peaks, etc. Right? So it's a whole gamut of things when it comes to running operations. And as I see our own business evolving, I think over a period of time, there'll be other kinds of technology, which is probably largely, let's say, in the traditional sense of the word, hardware, which goes into kitchen automation, which is again technology. But today, I think it's very early days for us and probably for the industry as well. But as it evolves, I think that will be the other layer of technology which would come in. Right?
Absolutely. I think the last bit of what you mentioned, we're seeing a little bit of that very early stage. But, I have a younger cousin who actually started working in one of these companies that produces automation, not in the kitchen level, but for consumers. So if you want to cook something, you just feed in the recipes and you can make all various kinds of dishes. So that's a big change we might see both in the kitchen side and at the consumer side. Now, to take you back to your journey, I think in 2013, when you guys spoke about or started essentially a cloud kitchen back in the day, at that point, cloud kitchen, the term cloud kitchen wasn't something that was, in fashion or in vogue, right? So was this something, how did the idea behind, WarmOven, your first brand, how did that come into being? Secondly, why a cake and dessert brand? Why specifically cakes and desserts? And in hindsight, if you had to go back, would you have changed that? Would it have been something else? Would it have been pizza and burgers? Or did you guys like the fact that it was cake and desserts that you kind of started with?
Yeah, sure. Let me start with the last point, which is, would we have changed that? Absolutely not, right? I think for most entrepreneurs, the first attempt or the first version of their startup is like the first love, right? Or the first infatuation. So you would not want to obviously go back and change it. But that emotional connect apart, I think from a businessman's perspective, absolutely not. We would not have changed it because it's a very unique category. The category has a lot of characteristics that make it a fantastic category for food delivery, right? So we would not have changed it, but let me just go back and tell you how we launched, how we got started and why we started with this category, right? You're absolutely right. Back in 2013, there was no such thing as a cloud kitchen, ghost kitchen, dark kitchen, virtual kitchen. All of this mumbo jumbo was non-existent. We called it a kitchen. It was a kitchen, right? And back then when we started, I think it was based on a simple insight, if you may, that we had, because a couple of us were running franchisees of other brands, again as part-time entrepreneurs. And one of them, I mean, both of them were in the bakery or related space. And what we realized was that the stores were on Main Street, very expensive real estate, but the consumer would walk in and most of the times either consume a 50 rupee pastry and sit there for a while and leave. Yeah. Or if they were to buy a half kg or 1 kg cake, typically it's a takeaway. Okay. And we also started to get some consumers who would call us 15 or 20 minutes early and say, look, hey, can you, I want to buy a chocolate cake. I'm going to be there in 15, 20 minutes. Can you keep it ready? So then obviously all of us are engineers, MBAs, etc. So we put our rational hat on and then said, look, why is this happening? And what we figured is that, or what our logic was that cake as a category, right, is perhaps the only product which is meant for home delivery or takeaway, because you would never consume a half kg cake sitting in a cake shop. I think 99.5% of the times you would actually consume it at your home, office, or some other venue, right? I mean, in fact, if I meet somebody who's actually eaten a full cake in a cake shop, I really want to spend time with the person to understand what was the use case. But so that was the logic, or that was the rationale which led us to starting this, because we had some experience running franchisees of bakeries, and this is something that we started to see in these outlets. And we said, look, I think if that's the case, if we can set up a kitchen and start doing deliveries ourselves, consumers will be, I mean, that solves the problem for a lot of consumers, because it's not just about takeaway or delivery in this category. There are 2 or 3 other very peculiar things about this category which make it a lot more amenable for delivery. What also happens is that it's a very fragile product.
Yeah.
Right. It's a pain for any consumer to carry it. Right. So I'd rather somebody bring it to me, bring it home to me, carefully, etc. Right. Of course, there are still some damages that will happen, but at least if somebody is trained to do it day in and day out, he will get better at it. Right. That's the second challenge. The third challenge is, more often than not, when you walk into a offline bakery store, you would never find either the flavor or the size of the cake that you want. Right?
Correct.
If you, from your office, if you were to go into a local bakery close by for a large celebration in the office, which may need you to purchase a 2 or 3 kg cake of the same flavor, more often than not, you will not find it there. Right? Again, it gives a very, I mean, it's not a great customer experience, right? And of course, there are challenges around the supply chain of this category, etc., which we can cover at a later point in time. But so all of these things actually made this, at least allowed us to think about this as a category that we should get into, and that led to the genesis of WarmOven. And I mean, the name itself is basically comes from that, which is it's a warm, it's still warm, that it's just coming off from the oven, right?
Yeah.
By the time you get it. So our USP largely has been around the freshness of the product that you get from us,
And
which you will not find elsewhere.
within your founding team, I know there were 4 members. Was there one person who was maybe more passionate about the cakes? Maybe a home baker who kind of said, yes, this is the way to go?
No, absolutely not. I think we all were business people, corporate guys, but we had dabbled with the food industry. We knew that I think we just stuck to some simple principles. Food industry is crowded. So if I have to survive or build a good company or a good brand here, I think the first thing that I have to do is I have to wow the customer every time he or she purchases from us, right? And that is the principle that we've stuck to all along. Even today, after we've expanded so much, I think that's one of our core operating principles as a company: delight every single customer.
Okay, absolutely. Now that makes sense. I've actually not thought about it that way, how, this space is actually ripe for delivery. I think early on, 1 decade ago, you always thought the first thing was a pizza, then a lot of people ordered Chinese food, but you didn't instantly think of cakes. But it makes complete sense because of all the challenges you mentioned. And, now kind of really puts it into perspective. Now,
Sure.
one part of the problem is solved. You guys have decided what space you're going to enter, right? But thereafter, now you've decided the name and everything. But what was your plan of action for getting it to consumers? What was the first few ideas you had in terms of marketing? Now, you guys mentioned you did not have a physical space, which is a big deal in the restaurant space, right? Having signages, having a physical space. Now, that was not there. So, what was your plan of action of kind of reaching to consumers? How did you think you're going to crack the market?
Look, I think our growth, while yes, in the last 1.5, 2 years, we've scaled and we've been noticed a little bit by our friends in the media. The fact of the matter is we've built this business on a fairly strong foundation for the first 5 years, right? And it was slow growth. I mean, it was not another classic hockey stick which investors dream about, right? It was relatively very slow growth. I think how did we get customers? I think it was just, we obviously were we did not have the deep pocket. So we were a bootstrapped company. The three of us were part-time, which is myself, my co-founders, Mahesh and Sumit. The fourth co-founder, Rohan, used to run the operations, whereas three of us would, we had invested some of our money and we would spend pretty much every weekend in reviewing the business, the progress, and setting the direction for moving forward. So that's how we started. To answer your question, I think there's no magic wand. There's no single answer to how did we get customers. But for the first for the first 4-5 years, I think the principles were very simple. We just focused on ensuring great customer experience,
Right.
and that led to word of mouth, and that led to growth in the first 5 years. In the first 1 year, I think it was how did we get customers? It was very simple. We had a simple call center. We had a small website, and we just reached out to friends, family, and folks in our network to spread the word, and slowly but steadily that started to grow. And another inherent advantage in this category is a cake is always consumed in the social context.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had 10 friends who ordered from a WarmOven the initial days, every time they ordered, there were probably another 10 other strangers who were consuming our cake, and that led to the word of mouth over time, and that the classic multiplier effect was at play, because I think every cake gave me access to another 10 customers, and assuming some of them purchased, it just kept growing. And all along, I think our principles of operation remained the same, which is stick to delighting the customer.
Right. I think with cake, again, that makes perfect sense, where if you take care of the quality, there is going to be someone who appreciates it. Like you said, a social setting with 7, 8 people, if cake is cut, there is going to be at least 1 or 2 people who kind of ask them, where did you get this cake from? What flavor is it? And it kind of leads to a very organic word of mouth. So it's very interesting.
No, you are absolutely right. I think if you've been to any of these kids' birthday parties or otherwise, I think the general comment, or forget birthday parties, I think when you're in a social event, in India, when you are leaving the event, as a matter of courtesy, you go to the host and say the food was fantastic, right? I think that is part of our, let's say, cultural code when we attend any social events, right? Now, whether a cake is good or bad, when I'm walking out of a birthday party, obviously I am kind of programmed to say the cake is good. The cake was fantastic. Now, imagine a scenario when the cake is actually really good, right? What's going to happen, which is I'm probably going to write down the name of the vendor from where it was purchased, and definitely will go back and order from there. And I think those are some of the things. Obviously, these are all things that we've also learned in retrospect. I mean, these are it's easy to see all of these things as if I was very wise back in 2013. No, I think these are all things that we picked up along the way.
Right, and along the way, now you guys have scaled a fair bit. Even looking at your video, there's KaatiZone, and there are a bunch of other brands there. Now, when you thought about expanding your portfolio, it's been through a series of acquisitions and partnerships. How did you kind of come to that decision? How did you highlight some of these brands? I think some of these brands that you mentioned truly in Bangalore or the other places were quite iconic. I was talking to Varun, who's on this call, and when I told him KaatiZone, he brought up memories of having eaten there. So how did you kind of, decide on this strategy and maybe these brands?
Sure. So I think let me just try and answer that question in a slightly different way. Our journey has been largely in three phases. Phase one is 2013 to 2018, which we've covered so far, which is, bootstrapped, not all four founders involved, and grown organically from one kitchen to around 10 kitchens over the 5-year time frame, purely on the basis of word of mouth and customer love. Right? In early part of 2019, Mahesh, Sumit, and I decided to quit whatever we were doing earlier and focus on scaling up this business full time. And the reason why we took that decision was the business was anyway becoming large enough in Bangalore alone. And B, I think we figured that there's an opportunity to create these delivery-led food brands across the country. And what we had done and proven with WarmOven in Bangalore could be replicated across the country. Okay. By then, we had 5 years of very strong foundation anchored by Rohan, who was one of our other co-founders, and a very strong, a relatively strong brand in Bangalore, right? And if you could do that in Bangalore, the question was, why could we not do it elsewhere? So 2019, at different points in 2019, we left what we were doing elsewhere and decided to focus on growing the business. At that point, we did two things. One is expanded geographically, right, which is going to Pune and Hyderabad. And then we also realized that we were operating in a category which is indulgent in nature, but to some extent occasion-led. Right? And we had these kitchens, we had this culinary expertise, we had a network of kitchens, and we had a lot of people in the kitchen, etc. So that's when we started thinking about what else can be done. Right? Somewhere along the way, I think we dabbled with an offline store in 2017, 2018. Obviously, it was not something we could do very well. It was not in our DNA. At that point, I think what we realized, in order to make the store P&L work, we started selling burgers and sandwiches based on some of the recipes which our staff had. That led, and then took a step back and said, look, if this burger is selling, let's see if we can roll it out across our kitchens. Right? So that led to the burger brand. Right? Then towards the tail end of 2019, we acquired this brand KaatiZone, which I think Varun was mentioning. KaatiZone was fairly simple. KaatiZone was a 15-year-old retail rolls and wraps brand, perhaps the first brand, QSR brand to be venture funded in India.
Yeah.
Really good supply chain, very easy operating processes, so that in a 3 or 4 minutes the roll would be ready. They had operated in multiple airports where the turnaround times expected are very, very short. The hygiene standards are very, very high. Quality expectation of the customers is also relatively high, right? So the brand, because of all of these things, the brand had very high recall and awareness. And second, it was very easy to operate, right? So we then said, look, I think this is a great opportunity to expand into other categories. We were in cakes and desserts. We were dabbling with milkshakes. We had a burger brand. And now let's try to expand into other categories, right? And of course, KaatiZone came along because it was a fantastic brand to acquire.
I had a question about, the aggregators, Swiggy, Zomato, Dunzo, so on and so forth. There's always, a little bit of tension amongst restaurateurs, commissions up and down. There are like stories here and there. What is your take on the aggregators? Where do you see it going from here? And another question is, do you also run your own online channels? And if you do so, what are some of the challenges you face? And how do you see this going forward with the aggregators and balancing your own channels?
Sure, I think we have nothing against the actual aggregators. In fact, we love them to some extent. Because look, we are fundamentally a cloud kitchen company. Our cost structures are very different as compared to an offline restaurant. And for the commission which Swiggy, Zomato, or any of these platforms take, they are actually fulfilling two requirements of mine. They're getting me a customer, and they are also delivering the order. Oftentimes what happens is people mistake the role of this aggregator to be a pure logistics player, and then argue that the costs, the commissions are very, very high, which in my mind is a bit flawed, because the aggregator is also helping you get an order, right? Which the only exceptions may be very, very large, well-known brands like a Domino's or a McDonald's or a Burger King, or somebody in that league where the customer is going to that brand, right? So I think from that perspective, I think the aggregators have a role to play. In our case, we have, I think we are completely aligned with the aggregators. I think for us, it's coexistence with them. And because our cost structures are very, very different, I think it works out for us. Fundamentally, if you run an offline restaurant on a main street and you do not have a very well-known brand, as a thumb rule, I believe that around 30% or 40% of your order volume comes from these online channels, your location level P&L goes for a toss, because not only are you paying high street rents, but you're also giving commissions on about 30-40% of your orders, and therefore it doesn't work for a traditional restaurant.
Now, just like a couple of more questions. When you think about technology partners, especially you guys as a tech firm, right? When you think about partners, say like UrbanPiper, what are some of the use cases you are trying to solve for when you partner with partners who are going to help you with technology?
Look, I think the starting point where we started working, when we started working with you, was managing these multiple brands from a single kitchen on multiple platforms leads to a lot of complexity, which a traditional POS system wouldn't solve for.
Yeah.
And also managing the menu, changing the prices, all of these things, running the store itself, keeping the store open or shut on these platforms. All of these things obviously are fairly challenging, because there are too many, let's say, if you may, handshakes in the way, right? And the complexity further increases in our case because every kitchen has multiple brands, right? Now, the way we look at it is that for the consumer, it may be multiple brands, but for the operator in the kitchen, whether it is the kitchen manager or the person in the kitchen, it is just a product that he's preparing. It should not matter to him whether the order came from a KaatiZone brand or a WarmOven brand, right? So reducing all of that complexity into a layer of simplicity for the kitchen is one area where I think the technology which we got from you guys was very, very helpful, right? The other aspect, I think, where this is just on the order processing, order management side, but then there's a whole gamut of things that go into managing the business. I think perhaps we've been one of the earliest adopters of your inventory management system and probably have played a fairly active role in working with you to give out the requirements for the product, etc., considering our own experience, not just in this domain of running food businesses, but in fact, my co-founders have in the past worked in software companies where they've built inventory management solutions for large retailers across the globe, right? So I think that's the second area where we've used technology coming from somebody like you, right? I think there's a whole set of things where technology can continue to help, right? I mean, from my vantage point, I think analytics would be the third dimension, which is how do I know who's buying, where is he buying, when is he buying, how frequently does he buy? If there's a way for us to understand that information or predicting how my business would do on a particular day, which allows me to plan the operations better. I mean, these are two top of mind areas where I can think of technology that can play a role.
So just a last couple of one activity we kind of want to do with you before we let you go is we prepared a very non-tacky rapid fire. So if you're game with that, we'll kind of get with it.
Yeah, I think is there an answer called pass that's allowed?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think you'll pass on too many of these questions, but yeah, I mean, if you want to pass, you can just choose to drink water and I'll get the hint the next time. But,
Done.
okay, to get started then. First question is external funding or bootstrap?
Funded.
Profitability or growth?
A balance.
All right. How often do you order from outside?
Fairly often, multiple times a week.
Do you have a favorite cuisine?
I would say burgers and cakes, but I have to keep healthy, so burgers more than cakes.
I think with your portfolio growing, there's no wrong answer to that.
I hope to get to that stage soon.
Yeah. Getting an MBA or getting work experience?
Work experience.
Finally, do you have any words for budding entrepreneurs who might be watching this, people who want to enter the F&B industry?
Hey, sure. I think obviously F&B industry, yes, definitely. I think it's very easy to, like I said at the beginning of this discussion, it's easy to start something in this space because all you need is a bit of space, a gas stove, and someone who knows to cook, right? But what is challenging is to survive and scale in this, thrive and scale in this industry. I think you guys would probably know more than me that the mortality rate in this industry is very, very high, right? What is often forgotten is that some of the most successful F&B entrepreneurs or restaurateurs have actually been franchisee partners of well-known brands. I think there have been books written about Subway millionaires or McDonald's billionaires in North America, right? 94% of the 30 or 40,000 restaurants that McDonald's runs is run through a partner network or a franchisee model. So if there's any budding entrepreneur that wants to get into this space, I think it's better to partner with somebody like us, where significant parts of the business are already de-risked.
Right.
And with the support system, the outcome will be much better than trying to start out on your own.
All right. And that brings a wrap to this episode of Decode. Thank you, Mr. Gautam, for taking your time out to walk us through your business, walk us through the industry. And it's been absolutely great to hear from you. And thanks once again for spending this.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Stay safe.
Bye. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and leave a comment below, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest in the food tech industry with UrbanPiper.